less than 0.1% of the world's population has the health and the wealth and the cultural and political freedom to live the lifestyle that we do. We're damn lucky. And when we can, get clear about that choice every day, choosing the stress, choosing the recovery, choosing the adaptation, the bottom line is, after you take off your shoes and you take your shower and eat and whatnot and you go to work, and you get to work and somebody, gets in your face and starts giving you a hard time, are you going to point the finger at them and go, you're doing this to me? Or are you going to see it as another opportunity for growth by responding to the stress rather than reacting to it? If we point the finger and we make ourselves the victim, we never go to recovery and adaptation. We stay stuck in the stress. There is no growth.
That was Zenman, Shane Eversfield, and this is the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. We caught up with Shane last month at his home in Ithaca, New York. We were connected with him by our friends Brian and Karen Delaney at High Peak Cyclery in Lake Placid, where Shane used to work. They thought he'd make a good connection for us, and they could not have been more right on. In reading up on Shane, it was as if we were reading about the long-lost sibling of Yogi Triathlete. He may use some different language than us, but the message is the same. Mastery is not found with mind over matter philosophy, but to quote Shane, it's found within mind in matter. It's about showing up to be present in training and competition, to feel the full range of an individual swim stroke, cycle of a pedal rotation, and complete touchdown, contact, and toe off of each foot strike. By bringing mindfulness into training, the physicality of our sport, the swim, bike, and run, those components, they become the mantra. We talk about how endurance training is fertile ground for mindfulness training, the difference between being process-focused and goal-focused, the gift of movement, and how we've lost sight of the playfulness that we used to have as kids in our sport. Shane has been practicing Tai Chi and mindful running since the late 1970s. He has a BA in modern dance. He is a USAT Level 1 coach, a total immersion master coach. He is a bike fit specialist, author of Zendurance, a spiritual fitness guide for endurance athletes, a book that was inspired by his first Ironman experience. And as far as his athletic resume goes, well, you're going to need to take a seat for this one because it's lengthy. He has completed numerous, I'm talking more than I can list, 10Ks, half and full marathons, ultra marathons, 24-hour triathlons, off-road Xterra triathlons, sprint, Olympic, half, full, and double Ironman distance triathlons, and open water swim competitions. Now, allow me to indulge you in a few of his career highlights. In 2004, he was the first person to complete Ironman Lake Placid on PowerCranks. And if you don't know what PowerCranks are, they are independent bicycle cranks, meaning one leg cannot help the other in making the pedals go around. So it forces the rider to learn how to pedal a bicycle in an efficient and powerful way. In 2006, he completed Ultraman Hawaii World Championship, a 3-day triathlon, which includes a 6.2-mile swim, 261.4 miles of cycling between the first and second day, and then 52.4 miles of running on the final day. Then, in 2012, he figured he'd up the ante, and he did the Triple Ultra, which essentially was 3 of these 3-day ultra triathlons within 30 days. And this was all on minimal training. Just recently, in June, he received inspiration that he put into action with his one-man, as in solo, Moving Beyond ALS quintuple Ironman, in celebration of his gift of mobility and in honor of his stepbrother who died from ALS. He not only raised money for the ALS Association, but he completed 99 hours of movement, totaling 500 miles with all 846 lengths completed in a pool, and cycling and running on a 5-kilometer course in order to keep costs as minimal as possible. I really can't say enough about Shane's accomplishments, but overall, what we really want to celebrate is his contribution to the mindful athlete community. So are you fired up for the show? I am. I've already listened to it a couple times. It's a quick one because we only had a small window of time with Shane, but it is power packed. And then after you listen to this episode, stop back at your computer, check out the show notes for this episode at yogitriathlete.com and click on the link to get yourself in the running for our September giveaway with Trigger Point Therapy. We know you're listening. You keep coming out of the woodwork to tell us that the show is making an impact on your life. So why not share that with the iTunes world? That's all you have to do. Just copy the words from the feedback you've already sent us and paste it into iTunes. Could this be any easier? This couldn't be any easier, you guys. All right, now, speaking of ease and flow, sit back and get ready to learn how to turn the impossible into possible with ease and flow. Everyone, I give you Yogi Triathlete Podcast, episode 20, with the one and only Zenman. All right, well, then we're just going to dive right in because we've got you for a little bit of time here this morning. So tell us about Zendurance, like the birthplace of it.
So I lived in Kona, Hawaii for 14 years. And for the first 8 years that I lived there, I would not go downtown during Ironman week because I knew that as soon as I was exposed to the race that I would, feel compelled to do it. So finally, in 1998, I went downtown, volunteered at the out on the run course in the Energy Lab, and went to the finish line with the resolution that I was going to do Hawaii Ironman the very next year, even though I'd never done a triathlon. So I began to train, and I'll preface this by saying that as a Big Island resident, there are 30 slots for locals to get into Hawaii Ironman. So my chances of getting in were a lot greater than someone, worldwide who's competing for one of those slots. So I did qualify at the half iron in May and began to train towards doing Ironman. And, I had no experience at this. Hawaii Ironman was my third triathlon. And I figured that, you could never train enough. It was just putting in as much volume as you could and hoping that you weren't going to, die along the way. So I had no biomechanical issues at all. My background is modern dance, and I've been, using mindful movement for my whole adult life. So 5 weeks before the race, I woke up on a Sunday morning and I laid in bed and started crying because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I had totally flatlined my endocrine system. I had, really kind of destroyed it. And it just, overnight, that night, I kind of went off the cliff. So it was the first time in my life, I was 42 years old, the first time in my life that I felt like, wow, I'm mortal. I'm going to die someday. So I had 35 days to recover enough to stay alive to make the starting line and to train enough to be able to make the finish line. And it was a really very, very difficult time to kind of walk that razor's edge. But I made the resolution that if I made it through this, I was going to write a book about addressing the discrepancy between the glorious athlete and the ordinary human being. And so I did finish the race, and I began kind of incubating and writing the book the very next day. And originally it was called Iron Zen, but during the course of writing it, I began coining and using this term Zendurance. Zen meaning mindfulness, endurance being endurance athletics. And my whole approach with it, with doing Ironman, was using my background in mindful movement as a way of training and doing events and things like that. so that the arena of triathlon or any endurance sport becomes a really fertile ground for training mindfulness. And that just, doing sitting meditation, the motivation to do that, the benefits that one sees in doing that are very vague in the beginning. So that having something like a goal, for instance, deciding that you're going to get into triathlon and do races and things, you start with extrinsic benefits that can kind of kickstart you into that process of doing mindful meditation or mindfulness training. And that the training for the endurance athletics, being cyclical rhythmic movements, becomes kind of the mantra. And at the same time, I have a extensive background in a more traditional form of mindfulness, and that is Tai Chi. I've been doing that since I was 19, so 40 years now. And it's the best investment I've made in my life. I don't own any monetary, I own nothing. I don't even own a car. But I just last week got on Medicaid. It's the first time I've had health insurance in 30 years. So I haven't had health insurance, but I have health assurance. So the Tai Chi is a traditional form of mindfulness training. I don't know it as a martial art. I only know it as a slow-moving meditative form. But it's been very powerful in that mindfulness training, and has really played very extensively into my approach to doing endurance athletics.
What is your definition of mindfulness?
I'm in the process of writing another series of books. This one called Kaizen Endurance, Your Aerobic Path to Mastery. And I just finished writing the intro book. And during the process of that, I was really, grasping to define mindfulness. It's in the kind of classic context, it's seen as the ability to be present in this moment, to fully invest your awareness and your attention in this moment. And I've begun to look at that in a little more nuanced way, and that is that during mindfulness training, like for instance, sitting in meditation, people feel that the goal of that is that you're going to have your mind not have thoughts. That the success of being able to sit and meditate is being able to turn your mind off. Well, it's the monkey mind. I mean, your attention is going to go somewhere all the time. But that what we're doing first is awakening an awareness that stands outside of that attention, an awareness that is calm and still and very present. And during mindfulness training, whether it's through training for a triathlon or traditional sitting meditation, that the awareness behind or above the attention, every time that the attention wanders, the awareness is aware of that and is able to direct and bring the attention back. And that the attention is always focused on sense-felt experiences, thoughts, feelings, or some combination thereof. And again, the attention is always going to be active. The awareness is being able to, what we're doing in mindfulness training is we're interfacing the awareness completely with the attention so that we're able to fully invest the attention in the present moment as it's unfolding, not drifting into the past or the future or towards our fears or our judgments, our likes, our dislikes, and so forth. And so it brings us so that we're really fully investing in the present moment.
And I think that's it's paramount to any kind of athletic success. And this is really what we talk about with Yogi Triathlete. I mean, I think Zendurance and Yogi Triathlete are pretty much, we're sharing the same message, and reading through your website, we're talking about the same things. It's just you have your own individual language and we have ours, which is great.
Yeah.
But as far as, an athlete out there racing who, the untrained mind, which is how I usually refer to it as, a mind that is just left to be the monkey swinging from vine to vine. I mean, how detrimental do you think that is, or how detrimental do you consider that to be, an athlete going out, doing the volume, doing all the physical, and nothing for the mental, like nothing with the mindfulness?
So, it has to do with approach. And the way that I kind of illustrate this is, most athletes, they'll go to the coach and they'll say, well, I'm going to do Lake Placid Ironman in 2017. I don't care what it takes to get me there. Just, write me a program. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to get there. I'm going to make that finish line. And yet, if you look at a musician, they don't go to the teacher and say, well, I want to play Dvorak's Symphony in 2017 at the JFK Center. I don't care what it takes. Just get me there. The focus is process rather than goal. So athletes tend to be kind of goal focused, where artists are more process focused. And, we need a balance of the two, process without direction, without goal. Who knows where it's going? But goals without process is where we end up doing damage and things like that. So as far as, athletes, again, I speak from experience of that, well, gosh, the only way to do Ironman is I have to really, churn out this volume and all of that is, as athletes, we focus on training the metabolic system, the aerobic system, the heart, lungs, the ability to produce energy, all of that. And if you're 28 years or older, your aerobic capacity is diminishing. Hopefully not too quickly, but it is diminishing. So all conventional training programs have you focus on trying to keep that aerobic capacity as long as you can, a scarce and diminishing resource. So imagine the aerobic capacity is like a wall. And basically your training is about pushing as hard as you can against that wall to keep that wall from moving towards you. And that, as athletes, we train the metabolic, we train the muscles, and we train the neural. And if you ask a room full of people, I've done this many times, which system responds and improves the most to training, what people don't get is that the neural system is the one that responds and improves the most. This is the most plastic system. So while you have this aerobic wall that's encroaching towards you and you're banging your head against the aerobic wall, if you turn around and focus on training the neural, there's no wall there. So that as you age, you gain kinetic intelligence, which is kind of the wisdom, and that you can become more efficient by focusing on neural training rather than aerobic. So as a result of that, I do long ultra events. I've done double irons, triple irons, events that last several days. And there's no, I train an average year round probably of 13 to 14 hours a week. That includes strength training. Doesn't include the Tai Chi, but it includes, strength and stretching and things like that. So that by structuring the training around focusing on the neural system rather than the aerobic, my aerobic system still gets trained. I can still do interval work, but everything I do is structured around always crafting really good strokes and strides, really good technique.
So essentially what you're talking about is what science has found, which is the neuroplasticity, right? That we can create these new neural pathways.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about craft and technique as the most important things, would you say, leading up to a goal?
Yes, I think so. What happens with people is, when they sign up for the race or sign up for their first Ironman, the whole focus on doing volume is that they're going to somehow assuage or calm their uncertainty and their fear about what's going to happen. So, especially here in the US, we live in the most quote unquote secure society in the world, but there's no such thing as security. And we really abhor uncertainty. We associate fear with uncertainty. If we're put into situations where we don't know the answers, where we don't know what's going to happen, how do we react? We react with fear. And that really uncertainty is about opportunity. So the reason that Ironman has become this big cult thing in the world is because most of the people who do it are pretty well off. They live pretty secure, stable lives, but they've gotten to the point where they're stagnant And so they realized that the only way to address that stagnancy and that feeling dead is to, put their asses on the line. So they sign up for Ironman, and then they're like, oh my God, what did I just do? And it puts them in front of something that brings a lot of uncertainty. So part of the mental training for it isn't that you're not going to conquer the fears, you're not going to stop the uncertainty, you're not going to answer the questions before the event, which is what most athletes I think try to do in the training, is and again I speak from experience, is to convince themselves that I'm going to be able to do this. When I lived in Kona training for Ironman, it was like I went out and rode the bike course every Saturday. It didn't matter whether I was fatigued or not. It was like, I need to do this to prove to myself that I can do it. And I mean, it was great training as far as staying present, being mindful, being battered by the wind while I'm out on the bike and the heat and that kind of thing. But it was really damaging to the body. And after going through chronic adrenal fatigue syndrome 3 times, I'm like, no, never again. So I'm doing every year several multi-day ultra events without any of this, by just approaching it from that mindfulness standpoint. So again, it comes back to, most athletes they're going to work with metabolic metrics, power output, pace, heart rate, things like that. I think there's some validity to that, especially to keep from overtraining, but I think it's highly overrated. And I've actually talked a little bit with Joe Friel about this, that, really the focus is and should be more on neural training. I think the reason that there's not as much of an emphasis on neural training is, 1, because it hasn't been what the convention has been. 2, nobody knows how to measure it.
And people want those numbers. They want that.
Yeah. They won't trust their own feelings. They want the metrics. Yeah.
So if an athlete approaches you or swimmers approach you, and how is that transition? How does that work? Because I come across that a lot. People want the watts, they want the power. But when you try to give them ranges of time to do workouts, or you give them the opportunity to own the feel of the workout, how have you worked through that transition? Or has that come across for you?
So, I've had a number of people ask me to coach them. And the only person I ever agreed to do that with was a guy who wanted to do Lake Placid Ironman. This is when I lived there. And he had never done a triathlon before. And the reason that I accepted his invitation was he had climbed Everest. And I knew he had the mental skills, and that he could deal with the whole uncertainty and all of that. And I don't coach, I counsel. I'm an educator, I'm not a coach. I don't write programs, because I'm honestly, if I wrote somebody a program, I'm afraid they're going to follow it and that they're not going to trust their own feeling. So I counsel athletes on, how to prepare for their goals, things like that. But, my own training is completely by feel. I haven't used a heart rate monitor in 10, 15 years. No power meter. I wear a watch. I log my time, and I know what zones I'm in as far as intensity, but I'm not really, I'm more focused on the feel. And I think that when athletes are staring at the power meter, they have no idea what's going on in their bodies, how they're relating to the bike. They don't really have a feel for their technique. They're too much chased on the metrics.
And none of that is helping them widen any kind of neural pathway to a more mindful approach, right? People want to know how to live life easier, but they're not willing to do it. And the thing about athletes is that they have what it takes because they've got the discipline and the will. But I think the uncertainty is what scares the hell out of them, is that, sitting in a practice, they're not seeing a result. And so again, we believe that there is some validity and some use to the numbers, but if you're just going to go off power, what happens when your power meter breaks during a race?
I think the power meter's fine if you can begin to equate that with perceived rate of exertion, and if that's what it takes.
Right, and that's what I was initially thinking, is that sometimes I think the reliance on the data allows them just to continue to move on autopilot.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some who are tapping into that feel, and that's how BJ coaches, is that he'll they use the data, but then he'll pull it away.
Mm-hmm.
And
I want them to feel. They always get shocked when I give them ranges. I'm like, I want you to run for 60 to 90 minutes and go out and see how you feel, knowing based on what you just did the previous days. And you may feel good or you may not feel good. I can't tell that. So I can't give you a specific workout, but I want them to feel and give them the ownership to take control of.
Yeah, and the most accurate metric for measuring metabolic intensity is really perceived rate of exertion. You can go into the lab, take your heart rate monitor in there, run on the treadmill and get have them prick your finger and do the lactate measure, and they'll tell you where your lactate threshold is, what heart rate that is. And that's fine for that day on that treadmill and that temperature and that humidity and how much caffeine you had that day and how much you trained the day before and what your chemical levels and mental levels of stress are. But it's going to skew every single day as far as where your heart rate is versus what your perceived rate of exertion is and what's really going on. So I think that the greatest tool athletes can have metabolically is being able to monitor and know their own perceived rate of exertion and not having to, rely on monitors and metrics.
And the only way to do that is to practice some sort of mindfulness practice.
Yeah, you got to be present with what's going on and so what the sense felt experience is.
I had asked you earlier about your definition of mindfulness, and the one that it's John Kabat-Zinn, which I'm sure you've heard of him, but I love the simplicity of his definition of mindfulness, which is moment to moment, paying attention on purpose. Yeah. Without judgment.
Yep. John certainly has like the no frills, this is it kind of thing. I mean, he's really spot on.
Oh, he's amazing. I mean, he's brought this stuff into hospitals decades ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the top treatment centers in our country are now using mindfulness based practices to heal. Yeah,
one thing, he calls it mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I think is a misnomer. You can't reduce stress. You have no control over, the day-to-day stresses that you encounter. What you have a choice about is whether you react or you respond. So this is the most valuable opportunity for athletes is, the fitness cycle is one of stress recovery adaptation. If you don't stress your body, you're not going to get stronger. That's the vector for growth. But as I learned, because I identified training with just the stress component, was just keep ramping it up, and hope I survive to make the starting line of Ironman, is that you also have to orchestrate recovery and adaptation. So every day I put on my running shoes, I go outside, I do my run. I'm very clear about choosing that stress and my ability to respond with recovery and adaptation. And then the big question for all of us, especially as athletes, especially for those of us who, live in a fortunate society like this where, honestly, like less than 0.1% of the world's population has the health and the wealth and the cultural and political freedom to live the lifestyle that we do. We're damn lucky. And when we can, get clear about that choice every day, choosing the stress, choosing the recovery, choosing the adaptation, the bottom line is after you take off your shoes and you take your shower and eat and whatnot and you go to work and you get to work and somebody, gets in your face and starts giving you a hard time, are you going to point the finger at them and go, you're doing this to me? Or are you going to see it as another opportunity for growth by responding to the stress rather than reacting to it? If we point the finger and we make ourselves the victim, we never go to recovery and adaptation. We stay stuck in the stress. There is no growth. And this is the most powerful thing about what we do as athletes is we roll the wheel of that fitness cycle, that stress recovery adaptation. Every day when we train, we have the opportunity to create a set of navigational tools that allows us to learn how to orchestrate that fitness cycle. But it's really imperative that we take that same set of skills and navigate through our daily lives with it. And this is what John Kabat-Zinn has done with the mindfulness training, is teaching people how to be present with stress and how to respond to it without reacting. So it's not really reduction, it's just a transformation in our relationship with it.
I know we got to wrap it up here. You've got to get going, but I want to ask two more questions. One, because I'm sure our fans want to hear, what sort of diet do you have? What fuels you for these long endurance races, and how do you recover using food?
So I eat very little grain. All my carbohydrate sources are fruits and vegetables, pretty much. A little bit of grain, not much. I do eat meat, and for a lot of people that's a real downer to hear that. I am a O positive blood type, and it just works for me. I was vegetarian for years and years and years, and when I went to a diet that included small amounts of meat, then it made a big difference for me. I eat a lot of healthy fats, tremendous amount of fat, very little carbohydrate. The meats that I eat are all locally sourced. I have friends that raise their own livestock. They're clients of mine, so that's how they pay me, is in meat, and also the venison from local. We've got a real deer problem here, so eating venison locally, local venison here is actually helping that ecology, because otherwise they end up getting killed by cars. So that is a big part. My body is really efficient at metabolizing fat. Last fall I did the JFK 50, I did on 100 calories an hour. The next weekend I did a marathon on 0 calories, and the following weekend I did a 100-mile on about 100 calories an hour. And when you're burning fat as a fuel source, it's a less oxidative damage to the cells than burning carbohydrate and sugars. So the result is the recoveries are very rapid from just metabolizing fat. It's really just much more healthy to the cells of the body.
And in those 100 calories, is it a gel or is it more?
A lot of times it's
bar-based?
what's on the course.
Okay.
I'm a real fan of Hammer products. I've been sponsored by them now for 10 years. I use a lot of their supplements on a daily basis. I use Heed. I use Perpetuum some. So yeah, it's usually in some form like that, more complex carbohydrate and not so much simple sugars.
So you recently completed the Moving Beyond ALS, I guess, individual event that you put on just recently. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, Moving Beyond ALS was to raise awareness and money for the ALS Association. It's a disease that affects the neural system. So, being somebody who is so focused on neural training, to me, it's really significant. Also, my stepbrother died of it a couple years ago. So it's just also a way of honoring him. So that event I did as a closed course format. I started it here, and it was all local, and I kept it, very low as far as expenses. I did a 12-mile swim in a 25-yard pool, and so that was, I think, 460 something out and back laps, and I had people counting. Got out of the water, and then I had a 5K bike course over on Cass Park. So originally my intention was to do quintuple iron distance. Once I got over in the park and started with the bike, I realized how naive I was about the park itself, and I was really amazed at the number of people who use the park and the number of activities that go on. And it became really clear to me that I was not going to be like, I'm more important, get out of my way, I have to get, these miles under my belt and so forth. So I, kind of gave up I have to get 560 miles on the bike so that I could be more aware and more appreciative of all the activities that went on. So finished the bike with 400 miles and then ran 88 instead of 131. The weather was pretty hot. We were in the mid 90s during the day. There's not a lot of shade on the course that I was using. But it ended up really being for me, a celebration of mobility, which all of the activities that go on in that park. I mean, I saw kids 2 or 3 years old playing soccer. I mean, they actually had like a little program for these kids, and it wasn't competitive. It was just very, very playful. I saw, all kinds of team sport games going on, from soccer to ultimate frisbee. I saw a woman with 2 dogs towing her on like her skateboard, almost like sled dogs. I mean, just the diversity and range of activities there just blew me away. And so it really was about celebrating mobility and about this gift of movement that we have. And that became really the theme of it. And that, for me, doing these ultras, because it's like, well, this is so extreme, you could hurt yourself. And I mean, I heard this a lot. I even had one guy ask me, well, do you have a will? And, it's should be more about honoring and celebrating and being healthy. So rather than being totally fixated on, I have to do 703 miles, I ended up with a total of 500 miles and 99 hours. And I was like, that's pretty good numbers. So I stuck with that.
Yeah, I would say, and I saw in the pool you did 846 lengths of the pool.
Okay. All right. I'll buy that.
That's crazy. Yeah. And so just as we wrap it up here, I saw something in an article that was written about you, and I just loved it, that you describe yourself as an artist and that triathlons are your art.
Yes. My background's in modern dance. And people are like, oh, well, you still dance? I'm like, yeah, I do. Triathlon is my form of dance. I mean, remember that, swim, bike, run, these are sports from our childhood. I mean, these are activities from my childhood that we then, have turned into this game, which, people take pretty seriously and spend, tens of thousands of dollars on trying to get better and better and better and maybe lose sight of the playfulness of it. But yeah, and this comes back to, every day that I train, I mean, I always have events that I'm, looking at doing. But really the training for me every day it's just like if I was picking up an instrument and practicing. It's just the craft of it.
And so what would you say to somebody who, let's say they're about to race their first Ironman or half Ironman and they're starting to get into that fear cycle? What would you say to them to kind of bring them back? Let's say they're receptive. Let's assume they're going to be receptive. Bring them back to show them that triathlon can be their art form.
Well, first of all, when you're going to a longer and longer event, especially Ironman, I mean, your first Ironman is going to be a death march. I don't mean that to scare you. It's just that the part of you that can't fathom that you're going to do it is going to die that day. The thing to remember with going longer and longer distances is, Ironman is not 140.6 miles. It's 1 mile, 140.6 times. And it's all you can do, all you can inhabit and invest in is the present moment, is to execute or craft this stride, this stroke perfectly with the greatest efficiency. It's going to do the least amount of damage to your body. It's going to use the least amount of energy. Then when you get done with that stride or stroke, then do the next one, and then do the next one, and then do the next one. And it's just, I think, the biggest skill that we develop from this is the ability to stay present with it for longer and longer periods of time. So, for instance, doing the Moving Beyond ALS, I mean, that was 99 hours. And, I had some time off. I actually ran back here. When I finished the bike, I ran back here to my apartment. And I did like 10K of the run and, laid down for a couple hours and then got up and then took off again. So there was a little bit of, taking some time off there. But it's about staying present. And, the things that I'm doing, they're really, if you look at the field of endurance athletics, it's not that remarkable. I mean, I have friends who do Deca irons that are continuous. My friend Wayne Kurtz has done several Decas. He's done a triple Deca in Italy, which was 1 iron a day for 30 days. So, that for me, it's just to really kind of keep my own perspective on that what I'm doing is not something that is like, high and mighty. It's just a day-to-day lifestyle.
Yeah, it just is.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. This has been a quality 35 minutes. Thank you so much.
Just if people are interested in this kind of stuff, I'm on Facebook, the Moving Beyond ALS. We had a Facebook page there. I have a couple websites. One is zendurancecycling.com. I founded and developed a method for cycling that's kind of the companion to chi running and total immersion swimming. So I am a total immersion master coach, and I came into TI with that whole, I felt that it was a great platform for mindfulness, and I've been a real advocate for, with the TI coaches about saying to them, look, movement can change people's minds, remap their minds. So be aware that you have that potential to work with them on that level. The other website I have is kaizendurance.com. And I'm, right now working on a whole series of books, and I also offer, I've been piloting here locally a Kaizen skills course for athletes, where we do some moving meditation in the beginning, and then we talk about a lot of the mindfulness skills. It's really inspired by John Kabat-Zinn's MBSR course.
Awesome. And we're going to put all those links up in our show notes. So if you guys want to check out more about Shane, we highly recommend. There's a lot to learn here. And if you dig the Yogi Triathlete message, you are going to dig Zendurance big time.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Made it into town.
I'm sorry, and this connection came through the Delaney's in Lake Placid. So It's just keep connecting the dots and it all comes together.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. So that was it, our chat with Zenman Shane Eversfield. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It is so power-packed. There are many, many nuggets of wisdom in there. I told you, I keep going back and listening to it, so I highly recommend just go back, start at the beginning, and listen through it, because there's so much to pull out of this. And this integration of mindfulness into athletics is growing so fast. So if you're not on the train already, well, we can only hope that you're going to be ready soon. And listening to this podcast is the first step. But I'm telling you, to train, race, and live more mindfully creates this ease and flow in life that my experience is, it's uncompromised. No matter the challenge or chaos of the world around us, it's the only route to our most powerful selves and the only route to our greatest athletic performances. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Please share it with your friends, especially your athlete friends, maybe your mom and dad, or people who don't really understand you as a triathlete. Maybe this will help give them some insight. So thank you so much for all the feedback you guys are getting us. Please go to iTunes, leave your review. And if the ALS Association speaks to you, just know that out of his $10,000 goal, Shane has currently raised just over $8,700. So he's so close to reaching his goal. There is a link in the show notes for this episode at yogitriathlete.com where you could click through and donate to help him reach his goal. And other than that, you guys, just keep riding that high vibe. I mean, it really is about living this higher vibration of life. And this is what Zendurance is all about. And this is what Yogi Triathlete is all about. And this is the way that BJ and I are living our lives. It's so easy to just ride that low vibe, to be negative, to feed thoughts of fear and doubt and all of that. It's the high road. It's the high vibe. It's the growth that is available in choosing away from the negativity that truly helps you show up in this life the best person that you were meant to be.